Oh, we are on chapter 4 of The Call of the Wild. And the title of the chapter is Who Has Won the Mastership? Hey, what I say, I speak true when I say that but two devils. This was Francois's speech next morning when he discovered Spitz missing and Buck covered with wounds. He drew him to the fire and by its light pointed them out. "That Spitz fought like hell," said Perrault as he surveyed the gaping rips and cuts. "And that Buck fight like two hells," was Francois's answer. "And now we make good time. No more Spitz, no more trouble, sure." While Perrault packed the camp outfit and loaded the sled, the dog driver proceeded to harness the dogs. Buck trotted up to the place Spitz would have occupied as leader. But Francois, not noticing him, brought Solex to the coveted position. In his judgment, Solex was the best lead dog left. Buck sprang upon Solex in a fury, driving him back and standing in his place. Eh, Francois cried, slapping his thighs gleefully. "Look at that Buck! Him kill that Spitz! Him take the job!" "Go away, Chook!" he cried, but Buck refused to budge. He took Buck off by the scruff of the neck, and though the dog growled threateningly, dragged him to one side and replaced Solex. The old dog did not like it and showed plainly that he was afraid of Buck. Francois was obdurate. That's a word to look up, obdurate. But when he turned his back, Buck again displaced Solex, who was not at all unwilling to go. Francois was angry. "Now, by God, fix you!" he cried, coming back with a heavy club in his hand. And we all know how Buck feels about clubs. Buck remembered the man in the red sweater and retreated slowly, nor did he attempt to charge in when Solex was once more brought forward, but he circled just beyond the range of the club, snarling with bitterness and rage, and while he circled, he watched the club so as not to dodge it if thrown by Francois, for he was become wise in the way of clubs. The driver went about his work, and he called to Buck when he was ready to put him in his old place in front of Dave. Buck retreated 2 or 3 steps. Francois followed him up, whereupon he again retreated. After some time of this, Francois threw down the club, thinking that Buck feared a thrashing. But Buck was in open revolt. He wanted not to escape a clubbing, but to have the leadership. It was his by right. He had earned it, and he would not be content with less. Perrault took a hand. Between them, they ran him about for the better part of an hour. They threw clubs at him. He dodged. They cursed him and his fathers and mothers before him, and all his seed to come after him down to the remotest generation, and every hair on his body and drop of blood in his veins. and he answered, curse with snarl, and kept out of their reach. He did not try to run away, but retreated around and around the camp, advertising plainly that when his desire was met, he would come in and be good. Francois sat down and scratched his head. Perrault looked at his watch and swore. Time was flying, and they should have been on the trail an hour gone. Francois scratched his head again. He shook it and grinned sheepishly at the courier, who shrugged his shoulders in sign that they were beaten. Then Francois went up to where Sol-leks stood and called to Buck. Buck laughed, as dogs laugh, yet kept his distance. Francois unfastened Sol-leks' traces and put him back in his old place. The team stood harnessed to the sled in an unbroken line, ready for the trail. There was no place for Buck save at the front. Once more Francois called, and once more Buck laughed and kept away. Pull down the club, Perrault commanded. Francois complied, whereupon Buck trotted in, laughing triumphantly, and swung around into a position at the head of the team. His traces were fastened, the sled broken out, and with both men running, they dashed out onto the river trail. Highly as the dog driver had forevalued Buck with his two devils, he found, while the day was yet young, that he had undervalued. At a bound, Buck took up the duties of leadership, and where judgment was required and quick thinking and quick acting, he showed himself the superior even of Spitz, of whom Francois had never seen the equal. But it was in giving the law, making his mates live up to it, that Buck excelled. Dave and Sol-leks did not mind the change in leadership. It was none of their business. Their business was to toil, and toil mightily, in the traces. So long as that were not interfered with, they didn't care what happened. Beely, the good-natured, could lead for all they cared, so long as he kept order. The rest of the team, however, had grown unruly during the last days of Spitz, and their surprise was great now that Buck proceeded to lick them into shape. Pike, who pulled at Buck's heels, and who never put an ounce more of his weight against the breastband than he was compelled to do, was swiftly and repeatedly shaken for loafing, and ere the first day was done, he was pulling more than ever before in his life. The first night in camp, Joe, the sour one, was punished roundly, a thing that Spitz had never succeeded in doing. Buck simply smothered him by virtue of superior weight and cut him up till he ceased snapping and began to whine for mercy. The general tone of the team picked up immediately. It recovered its old-time solidarity, and once more the dogs leaped as one dog in the traces. At the Rink Rapids, 2 native huskies, Teak and Kuna, were added, and the celerity with which Buck broke them in took away Francois's breath. "Never such a dog as that Buck," cried. No, never. Him worth $1,000. By golly, what you say, Poirot? And Poirot nodded. He was ahead of the record then, and gaining day by day. The trail was in excellent condition and well packed and hard. And there was no new fallen snow with which to contend. It was not too cold. The temperatures dropped to 50 below zero and remained there the whole trip. The men rode and ran by turn, and the dogs were kept on the jump, but with infrequent stoppages. The 30-mile river was comparatively coated with ice, and they covered in one day, going out, what had taken them 10 days coming in. In one run, they made a 60-mile dash from the foot of Lake Labarge to the White Horse Rapids. Across Marsh, Tagish, and Bennett, 70 miles of lakes. They flew so fast that the man whose turn it was to run towed behind the sled at the end of a rope, and on the last night of the second week, they topped White Pass and dropped down the sea slope with the lights of Skagway and of the shipping at their feet.